and maybe see, okay, we can apply this to our affix combination, but we cannot apply this other strategy to our combination. We have to try something else. So we'll see what those teams can show us today.
Yep. Be a lot of pressure, of course, on Outcast going up against some defending champions, such incredibly experienced players like those found on Echo. But hey, we've been seeing a number of times where teams getting dropped to the lower bracket can make quite a bit of run. So we'll be looking at, of course, this first matchup going to be Spires of Ascension here with Fortified and Raging Explosives, some very nasty combos. So let's get into it between Echo and Outcast here in game number 1.
I absolutely love that logo from Outcast. It's so sad though. But yeah, we'll see what they can do in this dungeon. And I wonder if they're also going to be maybe running a different comp, because I think Spires is a dungeon where we've seen lots of teams run the same or a similar composition. And there's also lots of different pools that we saw as well, especially in the second platform with the first boss. Some teams decided to just pull everything on top of the first boss, and some decided to split it up. But I do think that would be really risky with those affix combinations, because Fortified and Raging, that combo, is incredibly difficult to deal with.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to deal with. It's also it's even more difficult to deal with if the comp you're running is not at all a meta comp whatsoever. Across the board, take a look at Outcast's comp. They just have, maybe that's what the name of the team is for. They take all the Outcast specs and they put them all together. It's kind of cool to see. I mean, I think this is our first time seeing Bear Druid, first time seeing Mistweaver.
Yeah.
Is it our first time seeing Havoc as well? 3 new specs?
We've seen Havoc before,
have we seen Havoc?
But
okay.
Just once, yeah.
Oh, that doesn't count. Though.
And then it's all we also see the Shadow Priest. I mean, Shadow Priest we've seen before, right? But I think he's playing. That's the human racial, right? Yeah, he's playing human. Interesting.
Huh. I wonder what the choice for human is there. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't really know.
Well, they're still dealing with that first section of trash, whereas Echo has already moved on to Incinerator Arcalath plus the trash pack in front of the first boss. Not going for the bigger pull that we've seen in previous weeks, where teams will pull all of this trash and the Incinerator on top of the boss, but they've saved their lust as well, so I wonder if once Incinerator goes down, they're going to go ahead and pull the rest of the trash into the boss. They might not want to purely because of the affix combination, though. Like, Fortified Raging alone is enough to not really want to pull through the trash on top of the boss, especially just to keep your tank alive, but then also having to worry about explosives. That's something that's pretty nasty as well. And yeah, once most of the trash is dead, only that Goliath is left, they're going to go ahead and pull that in. And yep, they're going to get a nice little amount of cleave damage for their Hunter here, to be able to take advantage of trick shots here because of those 3 targets.
Yeah, and then, I mean, they also have the Enrage Dispel. They have 2. They have the Hunter Dispel on the shorter cooldown, and then they also have the Dispel from the Rogue. Well, if you look at Outcast, they do have that Guardian Druid, who can also get rid of that Raging effect. Unfortunately, they had a cast go through here on their side, as they popped their Bloodlust for this pull, actually. So they committed their lust for this trash pull. It is pretty dangerous, right? He did lots of damage on the tank, and he doesn't have his Incarnation up just yet, because he has been using it for that first pull. So yeah, definitely gotta be a bit careful with those casts. Lots of casts that need to be interrupted, right? You have the Goliath that needs to be interrupted, you have the Arcalath that needs to be interrupted, and all of these casters as well with the heal from the champion. But yeah, Echo, they are just blasting through this pull. You see Salia actually topping the damage on this boss pull because he was committing that Ashen Hollow, while the rest of the cooldowns from the other players maybe were used for the trash before. Either way, big damage, Salia, big dam.
Wait, why are they just dropping a feast to heal up with? Man. just tournament roam things. Oh, this is actually kind of interesting. Have we? This is kind of great. I mean, they're pulling both sides together here. The other divers from one side on top of all the stealth claws here. This is kind of disgusting. So I gotta remember, the affixes are really not nice for doing big pulls like this. Once all of these trash mobs drop below that 30% threshold, now is going to have to get way away. Now, they actually have a great comp for keeping the trash away from their tank. They have a Binding Shot to keep things rooted in place for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then after that they have the Ring of Peace as well, so now can actually just not take any damage while these things are all in the Raging scenario, and you can keep an eye on that. Yeah, Nether Diver's all dead, all they have to worry about is kiting around the Stealth Claws. Pretty much perfect execution there from Echo.
Yeah, that was really well done. And then we also saw Jinji chose to actually dispel the enrage off of the skirmisher instead of a different mob, because the skirmisher, if not tanked in melee range, he will start hurling spears at random people. And if that mob is enraged on a 1945, then that's probably going to do a lot of damage to somebody and maybe even kill them. So choosing the correct mob as well to dispel that enrage there. And that was really well done. I think we've seen this from Ambition the first time, where they pulled the left side trash on top of the right side trash, and they executed it a bit differently. So I really like the way Echo gathered up all of those mobs. That was really well done. Now they're moving on to that next platform. They are doing the double Goliath pull, plus basically everything else that is on this platform, just being all gathered into this corner. They made sure they line of sighted in the corner to get the Praetors and everything to stack up. And look how well they're executing this. This looks so simple when they do this, but if you don't know exactly where to move, then some of these Praetors, they're just going to be charging all over the place. And you see how much damage that charge just did because it was raging. That almost killed everyone there. But yeah, the way they execute this and the way they stack it all up is so important, because it's going to save you so much time. Because otherwise you're going to have those Praetors charge around, and then you have to single target focus them down once the rest of the trash group died.
Yeah, and I'm actually curious to see if they're going to continue to go for these massive pulls here. I got to remember, yeah, the affixes are pretty difficult to deal with, but if you have the CC and the kiting maneuverability of the tank to not have to worry about, you know, getting meleeed down on the raging affix, you can actually pull pretty big, and we've seen them do that a couple times here. And you can see they're actually waiting for patrol timings here. Frag went up ahead to get a distract on the trash, and yeah, they're going for all of this triple trash pull. They're going to be using that Kyrian Spear. In the burst AoE is going to be incredibly important here. The only person in the group that really has cooldowns right now is going to be Clicks. All Jinji has right now is the Resonating Arrow, which is a little bit of burst, but it's all going to come down to the Death GG procs. Can Clicks kill this trash before they actually have to worry about their tank kiting around? It looks like it's going to be pretty easy for them.
Yeah, another really well executed pull. That skirmisher is a bit high HP because it was outside of the pack. We did see Clicks use that Ring of Peace to get the skirmisher in at the very end, at the very start though, so did manage to get it down with the Goliath. So no time lost there, because the Goliath is the one with the highest HP anyway. So really well done. Looks like they're skipping this this pack. It makes sense that it's a squad leader pack. Don't want to deal with those. And now I actually want to see if Echo can also skip this squad leader pack too, because that's what we saw Ambition do. Ambition was the first team that pulled after the first boss. They pulled left and right side, and it allowed them to skip this pack that Echo is just coming up to, which is a really annoying pack to deal with because it has the squad leader in there.
Yeah, looks like they're gearing up for a Shroud. Yeah, there we go. We're going to Shroud past this trash pack, get a sap on the other diver just to make sure you don't get any proxy aggro, even if you're in this Shroud, and no issues there whatsoever. Going for the same strat as Ambition here. They're going to have to do probably the same big pulls that Ambition did before the third boss in Orpharon, but yeah, so far so good for Echo here. Pretty much going as expected here. These guys are, again, just leaving up where they left off last season. No problems whatsoever for them.
Yeah, they're also committing that Ashen for the boss here because they don't necessarily want to commit too many other cooldowns. We also see Fragnance use his cooldown for this boss. So basically just a single target cooldowns being committed, while the Windwalker and Hunter are saving the cooldowns for the AoE pulls that are going to be happening afterwards. And Outcast, on the other hand, they're pretty clean. They had this one death on the board, so it's not too bad. All of their kills, all of their pulls were actually pretty clean, which is a good thing to see. Of course, there's still a little bit of a difference in time, in speed, and efficiency of their pulls, but that is to be expected, of course, since they are that 23rd seed coming in here, competing for the first time, having to play against Echo. Obviously, that is a hard task, but them executing their pulls properly and not having big mistakes or any sort of huge deaths or wipes is really good on them.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious to see which pull routing they're going to go for here. We saw a couple of different interesting routes from different teams last week. What is Jinji doing right now on cam? He's like explaining something to his team. He was really like animated there, moving his hands around. I want to know what that conversation they were having was there, because be interested to see what those guys are talking about. I mean, how cool would it be actually if we get like VODs later on from the team POV with their comms? I'd love to see that, because I'm really interested to see how teams work together.
Yeah, I wonder as well. At first, I was thinking that maybe they're not even speaking that much because a lot of the strategies are really rehearsed, right? They know exactly what they're supposed to do, but obviously things can happen, and maybe you still call out what are you gonna do next, so people don't forget, just like you would do in a raid as well. So I wonder if that's what they do, and if they call out kicks or if they just know it by heart, and the Baylor have to make any calls. That would definitely be super interesting. Now we see Echo actually gear up for probably a really big pull or a skip. Looks like it's a pull. All right, so now just gather all of those Goliath and Wardens as well. Looks like the Helion... Oh yeah, the Helion is pulled in too, but the Helion is not in... There we go. Now the Helion charged into that spear as well. This is a really difficult pull because if any of those mobs are not in the spear, or if you don't have enough damage to kill them fast enough, now all of them are in raging range, and they're going to be doing a huge amount of damage if not interrupted. Even if those Dark Clashes go through, and if the heals go off, the Helion taking for a huge amount of damage, but... Again, it looked so easy when they do it, right? Like they do this pull and execute it perfectly and just dies in seconds. But this was actually incredibly difficult to do, and they did it perfectly.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the reason these are even possible pulls in the first place is because we're on that 19 dungeon level, right? Like, if you had these affixes and we decided to just like throw this dungeon in the 22 bracket, they would almost certainly have to cut down on some of the pulls, because these pulls on Fortified Raging are just so pass-fail that if you don't have the burst damage to just burst trash mobs from 30 to, from that 30 to 0 range, your tank is just going to die eventually. So yeah, I think it's really cool to see them still pull this off, even though the affix combination is this difficult. But I think also part of the reason they're able to do it is the key.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The key level is helping them a lot because of that raging fortified combo that is just brutal, and we've seen that combo before in the MDI, where teams definitely had to do smaller pulls and made sure they commit more offensive cooldowns for whenever the mobs are in the raging range. It looked like that spear, for example, it was thrown really early on. They could have theoretically delayed it to be thrown later, so they are still stunned when they are in raging range. That is always something that we see some adjustments for on those hierarchy levels. We can see Echo actually dealing with all of those usurpers while fighting Orifrion. So they pulled the left pack into the boss at the very start, and now they're pulling the right pack into the boss as well. These packs are actually also really difficult to deal with on Fortified Raging, just because if you don't have the aggro target in melee range, then they're going to start hurling spears at random players, and if they're raging, then that spear is going to do a huge amount of damage, because it already does a lot without raging. But they executed it perfectly again, made sure they have their CC, their Windwalker AoE stun safe for when they're in raging range, and then now was able to move away and to just finish them off. So really well done. It's just almost 12 minutes into the dungeon and they're already on that last platform. So that is actually going to be a really fast time for SPIRES. SPIRES, I believe, with the other groups, they had, of course, different affixes and different key levels, but I do believe that the clear times to fastest were around 20 minutes. So Echo being here in this last platform already is actually really impressive.
Yeah, I was just taking a look at that. Obey Alliance last week, who is by far the best SPIRES team we've had pretty much in any of our competition this season whatsoever. It was a 20 fortified with Spiteful and Goose, which are way easier affixes. In their time, with 0 deaths, perfectly clean run was an 1849. And it looks like Echo are on pace to completely crush that. Go at least 2 minutes faster here as long as they stay completely clean here. Now, of course, this pull can be very dangerous, especially, again, Fortified Raging, and they have to worry about those explosives. The Kyrian Spear is already gone, and all 3 of these trash mobs are still at 50% HP, now down to 30% HP. Remember, they do have that Windwalker Monk in the group to Touch of Death, the third add, should they need that extra burst damage at the end, and they almost certainly will with how different their HPs are. They really have to make sure they don't kill Lachesis here, because if that mob dies
really
and the
low.
other 2 mobs don't die, they will heal to full. And that is the worst case scenario. So gotta kill all 3 of these at the same time here, get some burst, and those stacks across the group are going up and up. And it's just, again, great execution from Echo there. All 3 die at the exact same time. I mean, perfect execution, and now they have 5 minutes to kill the boss to have a faster time than Obey Alliance. Jeez.
Yeah, and 1945, the boss, of course, is going to be pretty... I mean, this boss still takes a decent amount of time just because of the intermission phase where she flies away, and you can't really speed that portion up too much, but otherwise it should still be really quick. They did, of course, they committed their Bloodlust for this Triple Angel pull, so they had the Bloodlust at the start of the dungeon, or for the first boss, and then they committed their second Bloodlust here for that Triple Angel pull, which was really well done. Looked like all of them were delaying their defensives as much as they could to make sure that Sally has an easier time healing them up. So we saw the Cloak, for example, from Fragments being committed once the mobs were only at already at 10% or even lower. And we also saw the Feign Death being committed by Gingy later as well to make sure all of those debuffs get reset. And now they're fighting that last boss with the triple Tormentor debuff because they only dealt with one Tormentor at the very start with the first boss. They don't have that fire debuff dot ticking on them, but they do have the 50% slow, the 50% physical damage increase, and also the 50% healing reduction, which can be really scary because this boss does a decent amount of group damage, especially with those magic debuffs that are being applied to the group.
Exactly, and I do want to focus in a little bit on Outcast here. They've actually been playing very well, like much better than we would expect from a team that is seeded as low as they are. They've only had one death at all throughout the entire dungeon, and yes, they've been going at a slower pace, but I mean, if you compare the pace that they're going at in this dungeon to what, you know, most live key push groups would be doing on a 19, they are going way faster than that, so they're absolutely having a great showing. And I mean, we've been kind of hard focusing on Echo because, you know, they are Echo after all, but I just want to shout out to Outcast as well. Even with this crazy comp, and even though they are going up against Echo, they're still playing really well.
I definitely agree. Still only this one death on the board, so they're doing an incredibly good job. Excited to see what they can do in the next dungeon as well. Echo, though, they're almost in the last phase here, so LA is struggling a little bit with mana just because there's just so much healing that needs to be done because of that 50% healing reduction, but they should be fine. They're actually dropping incredibly low. They just keep dropping and dropping because LA is just completely He does have Lay on Hands available in case someone needs it, and we also see the defensives like Cloak being committed now to make sure they can finish off the boss, and there it is, 15 minutes 53, Spires of Ascension clear by Echo. What a time.
That is absolutely insane by Echo there. Almost 16 minutes for a dungeon that we always talk about as having just a lot of downtime, a lot of time between platforms to be able to get there. You know, very long hallways as well to be able to run to and group up a lot of the different mobs. So extremely well played there by Echo, taking game number 1 here in Spire Stettles.
Yeah, I think that it comes down to it being a 19. Fortified. So whenever it is a 19 fortified, you're going to see some of the absolute fastest runs that like theoretical max time wise. The biggest downside of Spires is definitely going to be that raging, and Echo having 0 deaths just end up playing that dungeon, and even Outcast with their very limited amount of deaths, they just end up playing that dungeon in a way that it is very fast, but at the same time, you're going to get punished in, like, whenever you get punished, you're going to have a full team wipe, because it's more likely than not going to be due to raging, and it's not going to be one of those time battles. It's definitely going to be more of a consistency battle between the two teams.
Yeah, no question. And look at how few interrupts. As you take us through this replay, Tettles, they had so few interrupts on the side of Echo. I guess because they just killed everything before it could cast.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to the composition that they're running. That Windwalker Monk and that Marksmanship Hunter bring the absolute most insane damage. And some of the pulls that they did in this dungeon were very innovative. I thought that doubling up on this pack, we did see this a little bit last weekend, but it wasn't that commonly done. But doubling up on this pull, getting all of those like Ether Divers and mobs from the other side, and then merging it with the Stealth Claws and the Dark Praetor, that's an absolutely insane pull, but it's helped a lot by the Windwalker Monk and that MM Hunter. And then next up, you have this pull that a lot of teams commonly spear, but it's exactly what you said, Jack. It's that they're bringing just so much damage and they're able to burn this down that they don't feel like they need to use their Kyrian Spear on a pack like this, which is very commonly used on. And so they're just trying to make sure that they get the Inquisitor kicks and the Goliath kicks, and that's all they really have to deal with. Now is able to face tank those Ether Divers, and they get killed inside of that leg sweep whenever all of those Ether Divers and Skirmishers are enraged. So it's not super dangerous because it's on that 19 Keystone level. And then whenever they do that, that enables things like this, where this pull was absolutely bonkers with how much trash they ended up pulling into this one spear. they got insane value from it, and that's ultimately where they were able to get a lot of that time clawed back to be able to put up a 15-minute time, especially compared to something like the 20-ish minute runs that we see a lot of the weekends. Obviously, that's Tyrannical versus Fortified. That's also things like Key Level. But that pull right there saves them effectively one additional pull that a lot of other groups do. And then they were able to use their second Kyrian arrow on the Triple Angel. The Triple Angel during Enraging is very dangerous. They do have 2 soothes in the Rogue and the MM Hunter, which is pretty nice, but at the same time, it is still very dangerous for now if he's not careful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you notice that they dragged it out of the Ashen? Because one of the mobs is really low, and they basically dragged it out of the Ashen to make sure it doesn't die. So that's also like a really smart move.
Yeah, it's a really good heads-up play.
And those are the little things that just make Echo such a fantastic team as well, is just being able to pay attention to those details. Like, oh, okay, we have a little bit too much damage on this. Let's just see if we can even it out. What are the other options that we have ahead of us to do? And I just think it's so crazy impressive for their team. As, you know, they take game number 1, like we mentioned before, Zyra, pretty expected because they are that number 1 seed. But also, you know, shout out to Outcast, because there's been a number of times where that lower seeded team doesn't show much practice at all for their first matchup, struggles mightily on some of the pulls or anything, and I don't think that was the case with Outcast. They just, you know, they're not Echo, and nobody is.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a daunting matchup when you qualify for the MDI and you look at your first round matchup and it's like, oh, well,
yeah,
we're playing against Echo here. What do we want to do here, guys? We have to hope that they just don't show up
play
they
Mistweaver.
play the worst they've ever played in their life. And I mean, yeah, they played a fun comp. They played it really well. And they had a good showing. But it's kind of the Echo show right now. And they showed us why they're Echo with the run that's 3 minutes faster than any other run we've seen. And that brings us into this Mists of Tyranid Scythe as well, which, again, we talked about this at the end of the show last week. These affixes are not necessarily the most dangerous affixes, but they're definitely one of the more time-consuming affixes in this dungeon, right? That Spiteful affix is going to prevent you from going through the maze portals every single time they're alive, so you either have to use combat skips by having like your rogue vanish and then run through the door, since he's out of combat, or maybe like you can use Hunter Feign skips while the rest of the team is dealing with trash. I'm interested to see what Echo's solution for this affix here is.
I think that... Oh, sorry.
Last week, real quick, we had Spires, and it was the same story with the Spiteful that was kind of bogging down teams here, Titles.
Yeah, and the Spiteful definitely does slow you down, but the thing that I was going to point out is I feel like Outcast is going to fare a lot better in the higher Keystone level dungeon, because like their strategy for the Spires of Ascension, they ultimately got punished because they were doing like very live key-esque routing, and Echo's not going to get punished like really heavily in a 19. However, in a 22 Mists, like with the Spiteful, like you were talking about, with the ability to just like wipe at that Keystone level, I do think that Outcast and their composition and like how they're playing the dungeon is going to be a lot more viable than some of the other strategies that we've seen. And ultimately how they played, like Zyronic said on the cast, it was slow and steady. They were still going to 3-chest that Spires. It was not exactly a slow run by any means.
And I'm most interested as well for this Mists, Nagura, because, yeah, it's going to be the first game and everything like that for Echo in the first bracket, but it's also going to be the second dungeon in our upper finals. And we've already seen last week how teams poorly handled the bolstering in Mist of Tyranid Scythe, right? They struggled with it. We saw it in particular on the side of Ambition, just eating up a lot of extra time. Now we have to work on Spiteful, which, similar to bolstering, they got to make sure they're killing everything equally so they can have that like little 1-second combat drop before they're able to go through the next door of the maze. So this is just a discipline game to be able to see how well Echo can execute in this dungeon.
Yeah, I definitely think this is one of the most difficult dungeons to execute when it comes to that to an MDI style clear, because of all of the reasons you just mentioned. And then on top of that, Grievous is also an affix that can definitely slow you down if you don't want to deal with Varuth. Because if you have Varuth and you have Grievous, then that's going to create a huge problem on the last boss. So I wonder if they actually want to do that. It's not tyrannical, but it's still at 22. So the last boss will still take a decent amount of time. And if they have that 50% healing reduction, then that's going to be scary. We'll see what Echo and Outcast are going to do.
Yeah, that's right. We've had a number of times where teams have been very aggressive, bringing those extra tormented debuffs into the boss, sometimes with punishments, and many times very successfully. So let's see what we have here. Game number 2 between Echo and Outcast starts right here, and this is your Scythe.
All right, so we have another interesting comp by Outcast here. We have the switch to the Vengeance Demon Hunter. We also see a Fire Mage, Havoc, and to the Holy Paladin. So they definitely switched their comp up a little, while Echo also switched their comp. They switched to that full physical damage composition. So they have the Prot Warrior, they have the Windwalker, Hunter, and Rogue. So full physical damage with the Shout from the Warrior as well, and that extra physical damage that the Monk provides. So huge physical damage comp. They looking to do a really huge pull already from the get-go. They're pulling the Arcoleth here with those with the higher HP mobs and that trash pick as well. So there's lots of interrupts that are required here. And you also have that double AoE that is going to come out from these mobs as well just in a second.
What is that Windwalker Mog? That is so obnoxious. Look at him spinning. Yeah, I mean, this is a crazy, crazy pull. A lot of the difficulty of the pull goes down once Incinerator Arcoleth goes down, and the whole point behind this pull as well, just to make sure Xaylee doesn't have to worry about popping anything other than the wings at the start. One of the things you can do is open up those thorns, go inside and get a full heal on the group by clicking on the mushrooms, but Echo has decided that they don't even need to do that. Xaylee is just going to heal through double Furious Thrashings without having wings available, without popping the Ashen, and they're going to be totally fine. Now they all can get those full heals by clicking on mushrooms. That's why you can see everyone's instantly topped off. They also get their damage buff now for the boss, and it's going to be pretty easy pickings to finish off these 2 Boundbreakers before they go into the first boss.
Yeah, I think I really like this strat by them here because they can actually drag these mobs around without really losing much of any damage at all, right? Because they have that full melee comp. The only one that is going to lose a bit of damage is going to be Gingy on that MM Hunter, but even he's not going to be losing that incredibly much. So dragging them around to pick up the mushrooms while finishing off the mobs is actually really smart. And now immediately they go into the boss here. It is not tyrannical, so it should be a little bit easier for them to one-face the boss, but it's still at 22, so the boss does have a lot of HP. It looks like they're really just completely focusing the Drone Man though. They're not really cleaving the boss lower, which is something we've seen from other teams that had different affixes before, to make sure they have enough damage on the boss. But it looks like they really do focus the Drone Man a lot here. Ingra drops to 93% at this point. Ash is already being popped, so we'll see if they can one-face the boss here.
Yeah, this is the first time we haven't seen a Tyrannical miss this entire season, so I'm curious to see, even on the highest key level we have available, how fast this boss is going to drop and how easily they're going to be able to one-phase it. And check out the damage here. Ingram Malik already below 50%. And you have to remember, one of the biggest changes they made in patch 9.1 is that this burn phase is now 15 seconds instead of the 12 seconds it was before, so it's a lot easier to get that one phase off here. And of course, with Ingram Malik below 5%, that's going to be a very clean, easy one phase from Echo here. No problems whatsoever, and we're into the maze.
Yeah, this is going to be the most interesting part to look at in Mists. See how Echo deals with this maze. It looks like they are... Oh no, they're not skipping Varuth. Okay, interesting. Alright, so they actually deal with Varuth here. Again, this is probably a choice they make because of Grievous, right? Having that 50% healing reduction on the last boss, that's going to be really difficult to execute if you have a 50% healing reduction or a plus Grievous. So it looks like Echo just chooses to deal with Varuth here. They got him a bit lower first, and now they're pulling it into the trash that they had previously CC'd. Then they also pulled the trash from the right side in as well, which they probably used Gingy's pet for that one. And now they're going to try to execute them at the same time so they can make sure that they can activate the mace without still being in combat. They also have a lot of Night Elves as well. You can see Clicks, right. Fragnance, and Gingy, they're all Night Elves to make sure they can Shadow Melt and de-aggro so they can activate the mace.
Yeah, and it's really finicky too, right? Because you have to, if I remember properly, the way the Shade aggro works is you have to wait for them to all spawn, then you drop aggro, and then you can run in. Yeah, so you can see after all of the Shade spawned, fragments on the Rogue there popped his Vanish and ran through instantly so that they could get through. That's pretty much what they're going to be doing the entire time in this maze. They're going to be using Vanishes, Feign Deaths, and if both of those are on cooldown, they'll be using Shadow Melts to drop combat so that they can still get through the door and not have to worry about the Spiteful at all. That's going to be the big thing that lets them not lose any time from that affix, and it'll let them just speed through the maze.
Yeah, that's definitely the strat that they're going for here. You can also see that there's a marker down, that cross marker. That's because the maze in the MDI is still RNG, so that means they have to figure out the exit of the mage every time, but it's the same for both of the teams. Click's actually going down here to a frontal from one of those mobs, so he immediately releases because they actually did activate that nut. That's interesting to see that they actually clicked it, because sometimes we see them just go past it for a time save to make, because they think, oh, we're just not gonna die. But they did activate it, and Clicks immediately manages to get back to the group.
That was actually very greedy. They just decided not to use any stops on one of the stalkers there, and he got bit at the last second as it died and just went down instantly. But no big deal, able to release and come back instantly. And yeah, they're going through with this strategy that we've seen from pretty much every other team here, making sure they get as much trash as possible and pulling it through the walls as well. You have to remember there's an interaction right now with the Shard of D's, that Shard domination from the raid, with Paladins. If they have Maraud's, which I believe Xaylia obviously has on because that is the damage legendary, if you target a mob while you have Maraud's and you heal, your Shard of D's will hit the mob you're targeting, even if it's through a wall, even if it's 50 yards away, and that'll pull aggro on it. So they can essentially pull up multiple trash packs through walls together and more efficiently cleave down trash that way.
Yeah, I like that strategy there, because there were no mobs in that maze that they just entered, because they already had pulled it before. So they just had to figure out the maze, and they had assigned positions immediately. Like the players walked to their assigned symbol and uncovered it, and then they figured out what the exit is immediately. Didn't waste any time there. As they just move on now, they have that Mist Veil, Night Blossom they have to deal with, a really high HP, basically mini boss, and they just pulled some extra trash on top of it as well. So at these kind of pulls, you definitely want to make sure you're focusing that high HP target. And you can see that's probably what Fragnance is doing. If you look at the damage meter, of course, he's doing a lot less damage than the Windwalker does, but that's because the Windwalker is just full AoEing, while Fragnance on that Rogue is just full single targeting the high HP target to make sure that trash dies at the same time. So really well executed. There we go, they found the exit to the maze as well. Had some shades to deal with, but now they're moving on. Up to 50% trash already.
Yep, already up to 50% trash. Not pulling any extra trash packs with this pack, it seems. Looks like they're just going to be trying to go straight into the boss afterwards. I'm curious what the decision-making was behind that. I mean, usually, you can see there's trash off in the corner there, but they just decided not to pull it for whatever reason. This is already a 5-pack. Maybe they already have the trash that they need for their route. So, yeah, again, like you mentioned earlier, the maze is random every single time these teams run the dungeon, but it's random in the sense that the teams don't know what path it is, but they both will get the same path regardless. So you can't just have a overall set route for all of your practice in the MDI. You have to be able to be ready for whatever route you get, and that includes knowing which trash packs you're going to pull through the wall in any given route.
Yeah, and that probably makes Mists one of the most difficult dungeons for these MDI teams to deal with, because they have to practice so many different kind of routes and different outcomes of the maze, because depending on which maze you're gonna get, you might end up with different percentages, you might end up with different cooldown timings and so on, which doesn't really happen in any other dungeon. So this dungeon really shows which kind of team can come up with lots of different working strategies for different kinds of mazes that are going to happen. Looks like Echo did pull a bunch of trash here on top of Mistcaller as well. So a lot of really dangerous pull. Looks like they also committed that Ashen. But Outcast having some issues, unfortunately, as two players already went down. Their tank is down. Did manage to get a... Actually, I think he released, actually. So they're trying to kite backwards now to get towards their tank.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that's a little bit interesting to me is that Echo has a lot less trash percentage, than what we normally see teams at here. Normally teams are up in the high 70s, low 80s range by the time they get to mist caller. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm curious to see like how much extra trash they're going to be pulling here because of that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we've seen a lot of teams try to pull as much as possible in the maze, so they don't have to do as much trash afterwards. And the reason why, I believe, is just because you have these staghorn mobs that have so many casts that need to be interrupted, and at some point you just run out of interrupts, right? And they cannot be stunned or succeed in any other way. Usually if the mobs can be stunned or whatever, then it doesn't matter, because you can just gather it all up and AoE stun to interrupt. But those staghorns, they cannot be stunned or anything, so you need to use an actual interrupt, which you don't have 4 of. And as soon as you're out of those 4 interrupts, then casts are just going to go through. And those casts are heals and AoE shields on everyone and all of the mobs around them. And that's a crazy time loss. So that's usually why we don't see incredibly huge pulls. But I see a smile on Gingy's face, so I'm not sure if they're going to be doing something crazy here that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, I mean,
he's preparing.
They're low on the trash count, like we already mentioned, right? So they're either gearing up for something massive here, or we're all getting debated by Gingy getting prepped for something.
Maybe he's just pumped for it, generally. Not for the crazy pull, but just for being in the MDI and being in the midst of Tyrna Scythe here. As they're now applying some markers. It looks like they're definitely pulling at least 2 trash packs. One staghorn got marked with an X, the other one marked with a skull. Obviously just interrupt assignments. It looks like they're interrupting on the way even as they gather up this pool. Alright, so it doesn't look like an absolutely crazy pull. They're definitely just going with this double pull. We also see a freezing trap there in the back, making sure they see those flying mobs that I forgot the name of. They don't want to get those in. Apparently they don't need them for the percentage, so they just decide to see them in the back. Now we also see the binding shot being popped by Gingy, making sure that the mobs stay together and now has room to kite if he needs to as well.
Yeah, plenty of room to kite. And honestly, I feel like the debate was what happened there, right? They only went for a triple pull. There's a pack right there. They could have pulled that one too. What's going on? Is Echo falling off? No, but in all seriousness, they're probably just going to pull that trash pack with the boss with other cooldowns later on, because that's just way more efficient than going for a giant pull, especially when your AoE is pretty hard capped anyways by the DPS you have in your group. There's no reason to pull extra trash in. And also, they have the added benefit, I believe, of getting some of that Ashen Cleave on top of these ads too, whenever Xaylia has that up in about 25 seconds or so. So that's going to be nice as well. They'll probably pop the Lust when he has that Ashen up too. So we're going to see a lot of, again, healer boss damage coming out here, even though there's a bunch of AoE trash here too.
Yeah, definitely going to be committing those cooldowns in just a second. Bloodlust already being popped now. Xaylia has still 10 seconds on the Ashen. We'll see if that gets committed too. I wouldn't see why not. So that's going to be a lot of damage in just a second. But clicks might be killing those mobs before Xaylia even gets that Ashen up. As he's just spinning around, you can see you see him just standing in those ads, making sure he deals with them. Also using that AoE stun to make sure they don't get in the middle and don't get buffed. I think they also get fully healed as well if they reach that middle area, right? That is like a little bit of an interaction with these mobs and the last boss. They basically try to reach the middle and then they cast some spell, and if it goes through, they heal to full and get like an enrage buff, a damage increase. So they definitely don't want to have that happen, but it looked like they executed it well. The boss already at 40%, so really fast. Really like lots of single target damage here being committed by everyone except Clicks, of course. He's the one doing AoE damage. They still need 10% trash, so I would assume they're going to be doing it after the boss.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to do it after the boss. I mean, all of their DPS cooldowns are down anyways, so pulling the trash on top of the boss right now wouldn't make much sense. Just much more safe at this point to finish off the boss, get those tormentive debuffs off of your group, and then pull the rest of the trash that you need. I don't even think that there's enough trash left in that one pull for them to even get. If I remember correctly, I think that trash pull off to the right is 8%, so they're going to need to add something else in as well, like maybe the Reavers flying around as well. So yeah, this is going to be it. Boss is down. All they have to do is get a little bit extra trash down.
It looks like they're doing a double pull here. That might be enough percentage. We'll see in just a second. They also pull some... Yeah, that's basically just the whole left side that they're pulling here. Lots of interrupts needed again. And yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of the offensive cooldowns are down at this point, so we'll see if they can handle this. Might take them a little while longer because of those missing cooldowns. Sally also a bit low on mana because he's out now actually going down here,
Uh-oh.
as they do have a Battle Rest available. Some of the casts went through. You can see the shields on everyone, so struggling a bit here as Fragments goes down too. They're just trying to kite it out, but Sally is dropping incredibly low, goes down as well. I'm not sure if they can finish this off. They're just missing interrupts at this point. All the Gorger casts are going off, the Stackhorn casts, with all the shields on everybody and the heals going through. So Clix is trying to just, actually he de-aggroed, he Shadow Melted, and is running away. So they might just be resetting this pull.
Yeah, that looks like it's going to be a reset as well. Genji is still trying to kite it out, even though Clix is just
Waiting for
dropped
Shadow
combat. I mean, technically they could kite this forever, right? I mean, the mobs are slow, and yeah, they're gonna get stimulates off. They have Tiger's Lust. They have the speed increase whenever Genji disengages as well. They could just kite this out and wait for their tank to come back. It looks like that's what they're doing. I mean, it's not exactly the most efficient thing in the world, but also just wiping isn't the most efficient thing in the world, right? And you could kind of see that this was something that could happen. It was in the realm of possibility because they went into that double AoE pull with literally no damage cooldowns. Everyone had their stuff off cooldown from the end of the boss. But once everyone gets back together here, they should be all right. I just got to keep an eye on Genji because he does have that 4-stack of Grievous here. And that can be a bit of a pain to heal off.
And they didn't activate the Night Fae respawn either. That's why it took them so long to get back. They had to run all the way back from the maze. So that's why they were cutting out for so long. Now they finally got back there. We also saw a hard to see on those Reavers in the back. And there we go. They did get the 100%. Definitely not a clean run by Echo, but they still won that miss. And they won the whole series against Outcast 2-0.
And no matter how invincible and maybe how comfortable you are with the dungeon, you always want to make sure that you have a backup plan in case something goes awry. And right there, Echo, they got kind of called out a little bit for not, of course, clicking the nut, the extra respawn timer and everything like that, or extra respawn point for them. But they still take that victory 2-0, and I was at least pretty pleased, Tettles, at how they executed on the maze in particular. And that was the big thing that we hyped up going into this.
Yeah, the maze and then that triple bug pull after Mistcaller.
Yeah.
Those are the two absolutely